time. So as opposed to, if you're looking for sort of a cash infusion, it's a little bit of a slower process.
So on the back end of this, ArcCorp had been trying to lobby in order to be able to purchase a larger plot of land inside this new exciting system. And they were kind of going above what was normally allowed to purchase in one lot, and they were pushing for this, and that gave some members in Senate the idea to push for a very exciting business opportunity for some lucky companies.
Yeah, so basically the idea was like they were basically trying to buy a continent. So, ArcCorp, as you know, they make kind of fusion engines and a bunch of other different things. And so one of the things that they were sort of realizing was they were spending a lot of money outsourcing parts and then having those parts be flown into their factories and stuff like that, which is great in theory, but the problem is, as many of you know, flying around, it's dangerous out there. Cargo can get lost or stolen. So what better way to kind of be able to control the products that you need to make your products, but basically like renting that property out to your outsourcers in territory that you control. So then basically it's a very easy kind of hop, skip, and a jump.
Kind of vertical integration moving on.
Yeah, so that was sort of their logic behind it, was that they wanted to try and get some continents so they could basically like sell a lot of property to companies that did work for them so they could make it on site and basically transfer the stuff over, which made it very easy. But obviously, it was a kind of a radical prospect for the Senate.
And so it kind of came forward that rather than just selling these larger plots, why not attempt the near impossible and see if they couldn't get someone to purchase the entire world itself, all the land rights in one fell swoop, because the influx of credits from that sale would be enormous.
Huge.
And so in tentative talks, ArcCorp decided that they would agree to do such a thing. And all it took left was bringing it to the Senate floor for a wider vote, and there was a big debate. Not everyone was very happy about this idea of a corporatocracy, of allowing corporations to run a government per se on these local worlds. And so there was a lot of debate and some compromises made.
It was basically, there are a lot of real kind of moral gray areas with that, because you're basically, it's obviously how do you, a company is sort of responsible to, its responsibilities to its customers, but also to its board and to its directors, and how are they supposed to reconcile being forced to take care of a population? Because, when the chips are down, odds are they're going to go for what's in the best interest of their company rather than what's in the best interest of the people.
I think you can trust companies to take care of people, though. I think that's true.
That's a fair. I'm being unfair. You're right. It was a very complicated thing, and then of course once the public found out about it, it was exploded again into this huge debate and stuff like that. Someone's phone?
And so eventually got approval, and they opened up the bidding process, and the 4 winners are the planets that you know today, know and love.
So kind of a high level overview. Obviously, we're going to talk pretty extensively about Hurston, but these are them in sort of a nutshell. Crusader, I mean, the interesting thing about Stanton 2, again, is, as Will said, it was a gas giant, which from the UEE's perspective was actually going to be kind of a tricky sell, because obviously it doesn't have ground. So there's not a lot of real sexy selling points to that. And so they had been using it basically as for their sort of naval shipyards and stuff like that. And basically we're sort of even toying with the idea of kind of doing a buy one, get one free type thing to try and entice somebody to take that on. But to Crusader Industries, it was actually incredibly attractive, because the sort of lattice work that had been created by the Navy to service their ships was sort of the perfect thing that they could use to build their sort of massive starliners and transports and stuff like that, because now they could do it in atmosphere, which was really enticing to them.
And then the next planet, Stanton 3, was purchased by ArcCorp, and they immediately started construction almost day one as soon as they could move into the system. And as you've seen from flybys over the planet, the amount of development they have is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. They turned into basically a big business park. So basically sold it to, rent retail space, production facilities, all of the stuff that they need to do, but also even competitors, they'll rent to anybody. They really do not care. We sort of, I always kind of in my own mind use this sort of the cyberpunky urban sprawl, where it's like massive advertising all over the place type thing, where it's sort of neon
transparent
jungle.
umbrellas. And then moving out to the very edge of the green zone, we have our last super Earth, which is microtech, which the climate is freezing cold, but that ended up being ideal for microtech to purchase because they wanted to build huge data servers underneath the frozen ground. It was able to keep it cool, and it was ideal for them, as well as having a lot of the resources they needed for their advanced materials to build their computer chips. So again, another ideal situation. And microtech had the money to do it because everyone has a Moby glass.
Literally everyone knows. So yeah, that was sort of the 4 plans.
And you can see like a kind of an interesting balance that we tried to bring to it when we were coming up with the notion of Stanton, of this kind of system where it was looking at corporations kind of run amok, like all the different flavors of it kind of boil down.
You kind of tend to hear, if you see, Josh or Jeremiah or any of the character people talking about sort of setting up silhouettes and putting silhouettes next to each other to see how they look, how their form looks distinct from each other and how their characters pop. And it was sort of the same thing with this, is you have, right here you have 4 corporations who have 4 very different outlooks on how they treat their workers, how they treat their environment, how they treat their products, and stuff like that. So yeah, they all felt, we tried to want to make them all very unique and pop and exciting and fun. And some of them are very cool and some of them are very dark, which we're going to get to right now. Cool. Which I need to do. Bink. So first off, we're going to talk about the big boys in the room, Hurston Dynamics.
So before we get into the planet itself, we wanted to give you a little backstory to the company. And Hurston has a lot of history behind it. I think outside of the Mesters, they are one of our longest dynastic families in lore so far. And so they can trace their history way back to the 25th century, and they're predominantly known now for being a weapons manufacturer, as well as they make warheads, and they also make a lot of weapon parts and advanced materials that they sell to other manufacturers, which is how they made their fortune. But that wasn't what they always did. They got their start in 2438 from Solomon Hurston, was kind of a middleman contractor, was how he made his living. He would seek out open military contracts, get them to give it to him, and then source out what they were looking for. So if the military was ordering 1,000 bullets, which isn't that many bullets, I don't know, like 2,000 bullets. He would go out, he'd be like, I can get you those, go out, buy some bullets, and resell them to the military for margin of profit.
Markup, yeah.
And so he was doing that and making a pretty good living at it. And right around the same time was when we had our first contact with an alien species. And that kind of, even though they ended up being friendly and everyone was really happy about meeting the Banu for the first time, tensions were kind of high on the military front about like, well, are they always going to be friendly?
It opened up a lot of weird doors, because it's like, yeah, they're friendly now, but who knows, in 10 years, maybe we'll say something that really, annoys them and things might go bad. So the stakes were significantly raised for kind of preparing ourselves just in case things went really, really off.
Which, good news for Solomon, meant a lot of more military contracts suddenly on the rise.
Yeah.
And there was this awesome one. They were seeking to build new orbital defense platforms, and they needed laser weapons for it. And he was trying desperately to get that contract and source it out. And he ended up figuring out the best way for him to do it was to invest heavily in a manufacturing company that was going out of business and getting them to fulfill the order by purchasing it himself. And so he took the plunge, and that was the start of Hurston Dynamics,
right.
Was just trying to fulfill this contract.
So it was sort of a weird company where their sort of early days were actually primarily filled with doing government contracts. So the public didn't actually know much about them. They were very kind of behind the scenes type company, and so he was basically snatching up as many contracts as he could, trying to find kind of cheap outsourcers to get the materials so he could get his kind of the best profit margin once he kind of turned it around and sold it back to the government.
And funnily enough, as much as he was about getting money from the government, he was really dedicated to not giving it back. And so he tried very hard. His big thing was about leaving stuff for his children and his family. So very early on, as he built out his company, he hired only family to work there and ensured that they were taking over. But what was interesting, it wasn't just pure nepotism, right?
No. I mean, one of the things that particularly you'll notice once you kind of start wandering around Lorville and Hurston in general is, and dealing more with the companies, you're going to see a lot of family names popping up. And yeah, so the idea with them was that it wasn't just, oh, this is my son, I'm going to give him a cushy VP job and everything's fine. He was sort of exceedingly paranoid and was about losing his money. So the idea was that, he would install members of his family in various positions within the company, so they would elevate within that position. So if they were in a position to take over, he could be confident that they knew what they were doing. Because the last thing he wanted to do was to destroy his legacy by installing an idiot who would just drive the company into the ground because they're like, I like cars, and spend all their money doing that.
So yeah, like people would start at the bottom in the Hurston company and have to like fight their way up to the top of Dynamics, which started a lot of family drama over the years, kind of like an episode of Dallas or something with a lot of backstabbing.
Which was a huge inspiration on the game in general. Dallas.
Take that, Austin. No. From there, they kept on expanding.
TWC's first orbital platforms were built by the UEE Navy in 2855 and considered by many to be an engineering marvel of the time. Used to repair capital ships, Providence platform played an important role in keeping our brave starmen flying and helping the universe stay safe. Crusader Industries adopted Stanton II as its new home in 2865. Soon after, Providence platform was converted into one of the most advanced shipyards ever in operation. Combining the benefits of low-gravity construction with the ease of atmospheric manufacturing, Crusader Industries can produce larger spacecraft faster and safer. Notice how our unique platforms allow the framework of the Hercules Starlifter to be reinforced without the strain of full gravity, using a bonding technique only possible in breathable atmosphere. And in preparation for the next generation of starships, Crusader engineers are already hard at work developing new innovative manufacturing techniques. When it comes to the future of spaceflight, at Providence Platform, the sky's the limit. But what about beyond the shipyards? Since its founding, Orison has continued to grow and change into much more than industrial platforms. Today, it's known as an unforgettable destination where employees and visitors alike can gather among the clouds to relax and unwind. At the heart of this new Orison is Cloudview Center, where luxurious gardens feature breathtaking vistas, renowned art installations, and first-class shops and entertainment. With all this, it's easy to see why millions of people consider Crusader a journey worth making. All made possible thanks to the most important part of Crusader Industries, our incredible family of workers. Enjoy your visit.
The wait is over. The biggest, baddest aerospace smackdown in the galaxy is back. That's right, we're back for another month-long celebration of all things with twigs, wheels, thrusters, huge guns, and so much more. And what better way to celebrate than a knockdown, drag-out, winner-take-all tournament of champions to see who the best of the best will be. It's all here at Ship Showdown.
And changing it up as they saw fit, always seeking that next way to cash in. And the family pass and the business passed from family member to family member.
Yeah.
And in seeking, it's a slim margin business, and so they tried to find any way they could to increase their profits.
Yeah.
And they learned early on, after a terrible accident involving a railgun misfiring and several people dying, that the one thing they couldn't skimp on was the quality of their products. And so that was a big thing that was started in the beginning of their life as a company, is the product has to be good or else we're not going to last. But everything else we can cut corners on.
That was the trade-off, was that they were like, the gun will be great, but we will do whatever we can to skimp out on the workers. We will do whatever we can to skimp out on their sort of any kind of amenities, benefits, stuff like that. And we will cut costs wherever we could, except for anything that would show up in the actual practical weapon.
Yeah, so like the claim to fame for the one CEO at the time, Ariel Hurston, was that they came up with their new contract system.
Yeah.
Where they would kind of, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, it was basically, it was kind of, and if you listen closely to a lot of the PA announcements, you can kind of hear elements of this. But the idea was just that he created a kind of insidious work contract that would sort of lock people in to these like really, really long work periods, but it was conditioned in such a way that it was very difficult for them to get out of it. So it was sort of like indentured servitude type thing, where it was people who were very desperate, who were in debt. They would kind of go out, headhunt people who they thought that they could snag, with the idea of like, hey, we'll give you 10 grand right off the bat, and plus you have a job. You just you'll owe us that 10 grand, and then you'll have to work it off. And so for a lot of these people, it was very tempting, because again, if they needed money badly enough, they would take that lifeline. But it would put them in a position where it was almost impossible for them to get out. So it wasn't strictly illegal, it was just tremendously unethical.
Yeah, and Hurston always went with an ask for forgiveness policy. So they would skirt the law as much as they could, do stuff wrong, and if they got caught, they would say sorry and pay the fine. But usually they had saved enough money at the front to make that worthwhile.
Yeah, and again, the products were really good, so
their connections with the military for making these awesome weaponry, they were kind of willing to forgive and forget.
The government's like, you really shouldn't do that, and they're like, all right, we'll think about it, and then
So at this time, Hurston started to get well known, but mostly because of the protests against their polluting practices and their labor violations. So they were kind of getting that negative connotation associated with them.
Yeah.
So for years, they worked very closely with the military, and when Messer came into power, they aligned themselves very closely with his family as well, and things were going great for a long time, and then the Messers were overthrown and kicked out of power.
Yeah. So unlike kind of Aegis, they had a lot of military contracts that were now sort of up in the air, because the government was like, we're not sure about this and sure about you guys and stuff like that. And so their future was in a little bit of jeopardy. At least their sort of primary source of income was in a lot of danger. And so they actually, for the first time, started to sell directly to civilians. So this was the first time that they kind of opened up the civilian market and started to sell guns directly to people, regular people.
And this was a big deal because they had created a few years earlier their Cascade technology, which was kind of their proprietary weapon technology, which was only available in